Everybody, welcome to The Unfair Advantage. This is a series of interviews with some of the digital, social, and research industry's top leaders, thinkers, and technology experts. I'm Calvin Jonk. I'm the MD of Digital, a South African company dedicated to being the glue between global marketing technology providers and local African professionals. Here at the company, we firmly believe that tech's only really as good as the people that are behind them. And this could be the founders, the developers, the users, and the actual professionals on the ground leveraging that tech to do these incredible things for their organizations and challenging the status quo. So what these sessions are about is to do a bit of a deep dive into those experiences, the history and the philosophies that make our guests leaders in their fields. And we're going to try and uncover what gives them that unfair advantage. So in this episode, we're joined by an old friend of mine whose career has crisscrossed with mine for at least 12 years, I think. Pierre Cassuto, the CMO of Humanz. Welcome. It's good to be able to chat to you like this.
Thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here.
Yeah. So I'm gonna preempt what people's questions are as they start hearing you talk and state the obvious. You're not originally from South Africa, are you?
I'm from France, of course. But I've lived in South Africa about half my life, so I'm hopefully I can call myself an honorary South African if you'll have me. Yeah. And I love this country, and I've spent about half my life here.
Yeah, no, it's good to have you. Thanks for giving us half of your life. But you told me once that your grandfather used to work for an airline, and that kind of meant you got to travel around the world quite a bit. Any interesting places that stood out for you? Where did you get to go?
I was very lucky and fortunate to travel a lot when I was a kid, from when I was very, very young to even more recently now with Humanz. But my grandfather took us to Egypt, to the Caribbean, to North America, to all over Europe. So I was lucky to see a lot of cultures and visit a lot of places. Never went to South America or Asia, but I've now been able to do that with Humanz. So I've just in Antarctica left, I guess.
Yeah, we all strive for that. What is, apart from South Africa being the obvious, anything that any place that stood out for you? The kind of place you would have maybe even wanted to live if you had that opportunity?
So I really like Tel Aviv. It's a beautiful city and an incredible vibe. It's the Humanz headquarters in Tel Aviv, and I spent quite a bit of time there, and I think it's an incredible place. I was born in Paris, and I think Paris remains my favorite city in the world. And it really is it's difficult to describe Paris, living in Paris. It's very different from visiting Paris as a tourist. And I would say the other place that I've been to that was quite a mindset change for me is when I went to Bali. I was lucky to spend about a month in Bali with my fiancée at the time, she was my girlfriend at the time, and that's when we decided to get engaged. So it also was like a big change in my life, in a really incredible setting, very different it was the first time I was going to Asia, and very different from what I experienced before.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. A month in Bali, I can't even imagine how cool that must be. But we met. Correct me if I'm wrong, we met when you were working at Ogilvy, right? And I think Ogilvy was one of the first companies you worked for, and you started there as an intern in France. So how did you end up coming here, working on the Celsius account and being in South Africa?
And being and you being my customer, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And I apologize again for all the tough times that you went through at the time.
Taskmaster.
I worked as a teenager. I started working as a teenager. Every summer I would work in a different place. I worked in a I don't know if you remember Laserdiscs from back in the day before you had DVDs. I worked in a Laserdisc shop that belonged to my uncle for a while. I worked in a sports shop almost every summer. In my last year of school, university, I worked in a company as a PR manager, even though I had no idea what I was doing. And so I actually started working from a very young age. My parents, always, I wouldn't say made me work, but told me that you could earn your own money and you could learn. So I started working very young. And after finishing my studies in South Africa, I moved here as a teenager, studied here. I went back to France. And I couldn't find a job. I tried, and I could not find a job. I did maybe a dozen interviews, if not more, and I just got rejection letter after rejection letter. And eventually, I found an internship with Ogilvy in Paris, an agency called Ogilvy One, which was a very, very prestigious agency at the time. It was considered the #1 digital agency in the world. And I started as an intern, and I started making coffee and sending kind of reminder emails and post-it notes and fetching kind of documents and all that kind of stuff. cutting out PSDs, as like a kind of like a designer intern. And I was lucky to have a really good mentor, a lady called Emily, who was really tough on me, but looked after me as well and taught me a lot. Taught me about kind of like discipline and structure, which I never had at the time. I was always more of a creative kind of spirit. Hard work, discipline, and I was lucky to then be promoted quite quickly and learn a lot about the business. And I then decided to leave. I was missing South Africa. I loved France, but I missed South Africa. I missed my family. I missed my friends. Some of my friends that I had here. And I decided to move back. And I joined my father's business at the time, a production company, to launch a TV show with him. And then I got a call. And I got a call from Ogilvy in London saying, hey, we need some help with Ogilvy in Joburg. We've got a digital division there, but it's not doing very well. And they're looking for some help. You're coming from Paris, so you've seen what like the best of our digital agencies looks like. Can you come and help us run it? And that was from London. And as I said, I'd worked as an intern in Paris and as like a junior. Yeah. And here I was being asked to like help run an agency. And I said, sure, I'll do it. No problem. It was a complete leap of faith and from them, I guess, and from me. And I was lucky to kind of be given that position and opportunity and to learn a lot. And again, be mentored while I was there and learn a lot.
Yeah, I mean, if I remember correctly, Ogilvy One locally was definitely one of the first attempts to have a digital proficiency within an above-the-line agency. And I think you were by nature of running that, one of the pioneers in trying to institute or create a digital agency within something as well known and I wouldn't say traditional, but standard as Ogilvy. So how was that for you? I mean, pioneering something that's now table stakes. Everybody has to be doing that.
I think what was interesting for me is I came from Ogilvy in Paris, where we didn't speak about digital anymore. Like people did not speak about digital as a channel. They didn't look at what are we going to do on banners and whatever it was. Like it was already like 10 years ago, 12 years ago, it was already integrated. It was already like a Ogilvy One designed programs that were essentially CRM programs or opt-in programs. There were content programs where brands could start communicating with people, drawing them in, and essentially building like long-term value through them. And like email programs, CRM programs, et cetera, et cetera. And then when I moved to South Africa and was asked to kind of join Ogilvy Interactive, it wasn't called Ogilvy One, it was called Ogilvy Interactive, but I understood them to be very similar. The discourse was very different. It was about, what are we going to do on banners? What we need a website. It was very, there was no real strategic intent behind it. And like most new disciplines, it was treated as a silo and as a channel. So it was like, what are we doing on TV? What are we doing on radio? What are we doing on digital? Rather than kind of looking at a holistic solution. And so I came from this world where I understood, the funnel, the entire kind of marketing funnel and the role of digital destinations as part of building data and building understanding of consumers and long-term relationship with them, and coming into a place where there wasn't that understanding. And so for me, a lot of the challenge was trying to bring that understanding forward and trying to bring that shift in thinking. I think I was somewhat successful in it, but not completely. And that's actually a pattern in my career where I was lucky to be exposed early to some ideas in one place and then take those ideas forward and try to drive that understanding amongst the teams. And actually, that's pretty much that's quite a golden thread throughout my career. That's learning something somewhere, and then bringing it somewhere else. And I guess that's part of that exposure to different cultures and traveling, and also being somewhere between France and South Africa all the time.
Okay, Pierre, thanks. That's really interesting to have that golden thread that you uncovered quite early in your career as well. But going back slightly, you mentioned your father coming back to South Africa. Working with him a little bit, and I actually remember that I think I spoke to your father, Thierry, before I even met you. I think Celsi and probably myself and the agency, I think white labeled Puppet Nation in a way that maybe we shouldn't have, and I had a chat with Thierry about taking that down at some point. But your dad was one of the founders and creators of Puppet Nation South Africa and eventually Zan News, correct? And you ended up working on some of these productions. Tell me about that experience. It should have been, I'm sure, amazing.
That was a lot of fun, and it was a very special time of my life. I was lucky to work with him right at the start of Zanu's Puppet Nation. It was called Zanu's first, and then we rebranded to Puppet Nation. I helped design the first two versions of the website and build them myself. I directed a couple of videos in the second season of Zanyus, which was a lot of fun, like including a spoof music video of 50 Cent's Have a Baby by Me with Jacob Zuma and Julius Malema when they were still friends. So I mean, that was a lot of fun. And actually, I need to change or add to one of my stories a little bit. I told you about why I came back to South Africa. But the real reason, like I actually got onto a plane to come back to South Africa, was that Thierry, my dad, needed to launch the first season of Puppet Nation, and they needed to produce the first set of puppets. And to produce puppets, you need latex. And there was no way of getting the right latex in South Africa. And he needed that latex overnight. 20 kilos of latex from France overnight. So he called me, and it was, I think, 10 a.m., and he said, I've booked a flight for you tonight, 8 p.m., Charles de Gaulle. You're coming to South Africa, and I've got the latex dropped off at your office. So here I was at Pierres, and I got a delivery of 20 kilograms of latex, and I hopped onto a plane, and I came to South Africa to deliver that latex so that we could start the first season of Puppet Nation, and I actually never left. So that's how I came back.
It must have been an awkward call back to France. But I mean, that must have been such an incredible learning experience and obviously so diverse from what you've done. But maybe not. I mean, do you think that that experience in the entertainment industry prepared you for what came afterwards in some way?
I think the world of production is one of having to make a plan constantly. It's one of like quick decisions, of creativity, of hustling, and of making things work. Like even if they look a certain way, even if they are a certain way, to make them look and act a different way. And I was lucky to be on set from a very young age, to see my dad produce shows, direct shows, and to see what that looks like, and to work in some of those settings. And what you learn when you work in production is to make a plan, is to like tight deadlines, like and just to like not get paralyzed by those tight deadlines or by not being perfect, and just kind of making it work. And fixing as you go. So I definitely learned from the world of production in the sense of being able to plan, being able to make sure that before we start, producing or moving ahead, we've got all the right tools and the right assets in place, but also just to kind of keep going and make it work within a tight deadline. So I really think actually it's a really good industry for anybody that's going to be having any job, to be honest, so any kind of work to be exposed to, because it's that. It's a little bit like the army in some ways. Not exactly, but I've never been to the army. But I'm guessing it's just like, you just keep moving forward and you make a plan and you just keep going.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I'm finding the more we speak to leaders such as yourself is it sounds like everybody starts working early, which seems to be quite formative, and definitely touching on a number of different sectors and disciplines, which helps you become this, for lack of a better word, jack of all trades, and allows you to kind of cope with what the world throws at you. So it's really interesting that that seems to be coming through as well. But speaking about creation, and before we get to the good stuff, you went started a project, a really interesting project, by developing this board game. Again, well, I'll let you explain it. Basing around the political scene in South Africa, but let's speak a bit about the board game that you created.
I created a board game about 3 years ago. I was studying at the time. I decided to do a postgraduate degree in MBA, and I had a lot of time on my hand because I guess I was working and studying. I don't know how I had a lot of time on my hands, but I felt like I had some time on my hands. And I decided to create a board game based on Zanyus. Zanyus wasn't on TV anymore. It wasn't online anymore. We'd stopped producing, and the puppets were back in their boxes, and I really wanted to bring the puppets back out of their boxes. So the election was coming up in South Africa, a big election, between NDZ and Cyril. And I decided to create a game. I wanted to create a video game initially, and then as I started kind of deep diving into what it takes to create a video game, I realized that I wasn't going to be able to produce a video game in timelines I wanted, but I still wanted to produce a game. And so I had a very good friend who was into board gaming, and I was seeing what he was doing, and I learned a little bit from him and how those board games worked, and I decided to create a game. And it was a very fun experience. And actually, I mean, there were two reasons I was doing it. One was for fun, and I really believe in doing stuff for fun, like doing stuff that doesn't feel like work, that you're doing because you just want to do them, right? And creating things for the sake of creating. And the second reason was because I'd never done anything in manufacturing. I've always been in kind of digital and video and very kind of non-material things. and I never manufactured anything. And so I wanted to have the experience of manufacturing and knowing what that was like. And I guess that was part of my studies too, in some ways. So, we had a factory in China that produced the games. We had a designer in South Africa and a couple of artists that were involved in it. We had shipping and custom rights and distribution and built an e-commerce site and all the stuff I'd never done to sell physical goods. And in some ways, that was also part of my education. So I did it for the education side, but also for the fun, because it was just a lot of fun.
Yeah. I mean, there's almost like this engineering mindset comes out, this need for creation, and you've mentioned to me before that this need to leave a legacy is very important to you, and to me it seems like you're doing that through the creation of content, of board games, of things, and now the creation of a company. So it's really interesting that what you've told me in the past about creating this idea of Pierre Cassuto in the future and this legacy is done through actually building things.
Right. I don't know if I'll ultimately leave a legacy that's meaningful, and I think it's maybe arrogant to think this way, kind of ever. But I do believe that you live by doing things. Like your life is meaningful, becomes meaningful by doing things. I'm an atheist myself. I don't believe there's anything after life, and so I'm kind of trying to enjoy it to the fullest now. But also, I guess maybe there's this kind of like deeper, more meaningful need in me to just say, hey, by kind of trading things and leaving things behind, it means that I exist. I think it was a French philosopher who once said, "I think, therefore I am." I think for me, it's more like I do, therefore I am, and that's more my own kind of philosophy around it.
Yeah, I love that. I do, therefore I am. So let's get to some of the good stuff, right? I mean, all of that is obviously good, but after all of that, you had some experience in media buying, and you had a couple of really interesting roles between Ogilvy and Zahn News. But then recently we get to Humanz, and that's the reason why we're here. When was that? When did the Humanz adventure start?
Started 2018. So mid 2018, I was approached by a friend. I was in a bit of a rut in my career. I was working in a company that I joined a few years before, and there was a plan for me to join the company, help it grow, help it transform, and ultimately sell it off. And I was seeing that wasn't happening. So I was really questioning and thinking about whether I was doing the right thing and looking at other things. And a really good friend of mine, I went to university with him, worked for a private investment firm, and he put me in touch or got me to discover Humanz. 5 guys in Israel working in a garage or into like a tiny little office. It wasn't a garage, but it was like literally a shoebox office. And he said to me, look, we're thinking about investing in this business. Why don't you come with me to Tel Aviv and meet the guys? Because I think I'm interested in your opinion, and I think you might be interested. So I said, okay, I'll join you. And so, I mean, free ticket to Tel Aviv. Who wouldn't say yes, right? So we went there together. I met the guys, and I fell in love immediately. And Humanz was what I fell in love with, and were the people. I know that sounds maybe quite cliche, but throughout my life, I always thought that one of the reasons I would struggle to start something was that I would never find the right partner. I know, some people can be very successful solo entrepreneurs, but I think it's really difficult. And I saw my dad throughout his life be a solo entrepreneur. He worked sole owner of his company, sole person driving things, and very successful, but also very difficult. And I saw some of my friends who were also successful entrepreneurs, and typically they were in two or three of them together. And so I tried to join and attach myself to different entities that could help me follow those entrepreneurial goals, but at the same time find the right partners. And I never could. And I met the guys, 5 young guys, all incredibly smart, incredibly talented. We had a lot of fun. Still to this day we do. Still to this day I'm amazed by how smart and talented my colleagues are and the people that I work with, my partners are. And I just fell in love with them, if that makes sense. Like the project of Humanz, we were defining it. It was a mess when I first joined. It was a beautiful idea, but it was a mess. But I knew that team, those 5 guys were, and me, if I were to join them, we could make magic. And I've kind of followed that, and it hasn't let me down. We're still here today, and they are like challenging. We're challenging ourselves, but also just having so much fun. And I wouldn't change for anything. We're like family.
It's brilliant.
We're like a sports like a great sports team.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a better metaphor.
Yeah, the Reed Hastings model. So what is, I mean, any superhero movie and story has a really compelling origin story. Do you want to maybe touch on that a little bit? How did this start? I know that there were hairdressers involved.
So Humanz started 3 years ago in Israel, and it was at the time a company called Moi Media, and Moi means myself. It's like a media of me. I guess that was the idea for them. It was a purple logo. I still have the cap somewhere in my dressing, I think. So maybe I'll bring it out later. I'll show you the before and after. But Moi Media was those 5 guys I spoke to you about: Yav, Eliran, Roy, Shmuel, and Kobe, and they were coming out of the army. They were coming out of a division of the Israeli army called the 8200. I think you know that in Israel, everybody has to go to the army for these 3 years. If you're going to be an officer, or if you go to a special division like the 8200, you go for 6 years. And so they were in that division, and the 8200 is the R&D division of the Israeli army. Like the top kids from Israel go there. You have to be really good at math, really good at science, or software development. And you're basically taught everything in the army. So you're studying while you're working. You're being taught while you're working. So they worked there for 6 years, and when they came out, they were in the same unit. Instead of going to work for Microsoft and Amazon, it would have been paid amazing salaries. They decided to create their own company. And their idea at the time was to say, well, we're all very active on Instagram, and we're seeing how fast influencer marketing is growing. You know what doesn't exist? Influencer marketing for local businesses. So why don't we create an influencer marketing solution for bakers and corner stores and whatever it was? And they created great software. Like the software, even from the beginning, was obviously using all the stuff they'd learned in the army, from fraud detection to identifying kind of real interesting patterns in data to making workflow systems really efficient. It was a really cool piece of software. The problem was that the reason why nobody was doing local influencer marketing for corner stores is because it was a bad idea. It wasn't fit for purpose. Influencer marketing is obviously has audiences that are typically quite spread out geographically. It's not kind of really focused on one area or one place. It's more clustered around interests, activities, or interest areas. And secondly, the corner stores already were struggling to kind of learn AdWords and like how to build a website, and they were struggling with these very basic concepts. So add influencer marketing, and they were like, "Oh, I'm sorry, like this is just too much work. I don't know what I'm doing." So it wasn't fit for purpose. It was great tool, but wrong kind of focus area. And quickly, it was just before I joined, but the team decided to rebrand to Humanz at the time and shift the focus. And really, I came right at the start of that. When the focus shifted after my friend and some of his colleagues invested in the company towards more of a traditional influencer marketing model, working for big enterprise companies, as we realized that actually there were so many players out there that had been there for a very long time, and yet they all still failed to meet the basic needs and to solve the basic problems of influencer marketing. So we were lucky to come in as like a late entrant when everybody had already been there, had made mistakes, and what we were able to identify what the key issues were that were still there, and just focus on those, not try to do anything else, just focus on those key issues and try to solve for them. So that's the kind of
what were those key issues, and maybe if you can talk to what the other companies and platforms in the industry were looking to or trying to solve, and what you guys saw as that niche that needed to be filled.
There were basically 2 types of companies in the influencer marketing space, in the technology space to be specific. There were marketplace platforms on one hand, and marketplace platforms you can think of as Uber for influencers. So influencers or aspiring influencers or people that say they're influencers would sign up on one hand, and they would tell you all these things about themselves. I love football. I don't know. I live in Paris, whatever it is, and what they tell you about themselves. And on the other hand, brands would sign up, and like Uber, it would make it really easy to work together. It would make it really easy, and so there would be workflow tools, there'd be some reporting tools, there'd be contracting and payment tools. So it would make the process of influencer marketing easier. But it wouldn't make it safer, and it wouldn't make it accurate. And so when we looked at campaigns that were run on those platforms, they were like going to the casino. The average ROI of influencer marketing was really high, but the variance was massive. So you had about 60 to 70% of people that did influencer campaign that got nothing back. and the remaining got 20 to 30 times their money back. So huge ROI. And everybody was fixated on this, like, average ROI of influencer marketing is 600%. Wow. But nobody got 600%. It was 0 or like 3,000. And so we realized that, I mean, if you're investing in stock, if marketing money is investment money, you would never invest in stocks that just keep going, right? You don't want a volatile portfolio. You want like a very safe portfolio, or you want one you can predict success. And so we realized that was a real issue of influencer marketing, because these marketplace platforms made it easy but didn't give you the right data. On the other hand, you had data platforms that would essentially suck data from Facebook, whether it was Instagram or Facebook, Twitter, and whatever other platforms, Google, YouTube, and it would take all that data from the APIs and it would display it in a beautiful dashboard, and maybe they'd run a couple of algorithms on top of it to analyze the data. Big spike, a perfect example, this person's followers has a big spike on this day. It means they must have bought followers on that day, right? And so some of the assumptions that were underlying those APIs were actually, those algorithms, were not accurate, because somebody could have had a big spike in followers because, I don't know, a celebrity tagged them, or they were on the news, or whatever it was. And secondly, the data source were volatile and not accurate. And what I mean by that is, April 2018, we all know Facebook kind of completely changed the API so that you couldn't access all the data. Twitter regularly changes the API and how it works. And so those platforms were constantly trying to catch up, and they were always broken. They were always like, oh, crap, the data is not working anymore. It's not the same, or they've changed how it's... So they were always trying to fix their platforms that were broken. The second thing is that the data they were getting from the platforms was not accurate. And what I mean by that is, if you're Facebook and you've got 2 billion users, you've got no incentive in telling people that 20% or 30% of those users are bots, or fake followers, or hacked accounts, right? And so there was a lot of noise in that data. There were a lot of data that people were basing decisions on that was the data we were getting from social networks, but that wasn't audited. There was no auditing tool for the data that social networks were providing. So what we did was essentially combine both platforms. So offer a workflow system that makes it easy to work with influencers, but doesn't limit you to working with influencers that are signed up, but also lets you find any influencer and vets them from the ground up, using the same way a human would. So we don't suck data from the APIs. We don't grab data from Instagram, from Twitter, from Facebook. We do what our machines do, is they reproduce what a human does. And one of the reasons we call humans is we look at your Instagram profile and we say, okay, we can see you're a man, you're in your 30s, you like running, you have kids, because I can see your picture using my brain. I can look at your pictures, I can read your bio, I can see you're tagging your photos from Johannesburg or Pretoria, I can see what your interests are. And we do that for you, every single picture, every single piece of text. So we analyze and understand what it's about and what you're about. And we do that for every single one of your followers as well. And out of that, we then measure and see, okay, how many of those followers are real? How many of them actually know you? How many of them are actually interested in what you're doing? Do their interest match your interest? And if their interest and your interest match, then potentially you're an influencer within that space, right? Because they follow you because of that. So we basically completely try. One of the questions we try to answer was, how do you define influencer online? And I think it doesn't have a perfect answer yet, and it's a very subjective question, and will keep on evolving. But there were no appropriate answers, and one of the reasons we've been so successful so far is potentially because our software is the closest to providing that answer today.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating, because I've always, when speaking to people about tech, they want to know kind of what can tech do that you can't do yourself, and that's not normally the case. It's really just about trying to be as close to what you can do, but doing that at scale. And I like that approach that you guys have taken to thinking about the tech as well. But like you've said, the market was very cluttered, and still is. Very, very cluttered. You've got hundreds of different software providers locally. We've got people like Webfluential that have been around for a very long time, and global companies like the Hash that are here as well. But in the 3 years that you guys have been in the market, I feel like you've already made a really big name for yourself and being able to cut through that clutter. And as CMO, that is obviously all you're doing. How did you do that? What was your approach to making yourselves stand out in this cluttered wild west of a space?
There are a couple of things I think that we can attribute to that, and like you said, we've been very lucky and very blessed to receive an amazing response where we've launched. And in fact, we're being asked to launch in new countries all the time, and we can't keep up. We've just finished raising more money. We just raised another $1.5 million in the middle of COVID, which was amazing and really testament to the team and the trust that's being put in us by investors. And we've just launched in Brazil. We've just launched in the UK. And everywhere we launch, we're launching based on demand. Influencers are asking us to launch. Brands are asking us to launch. So we're following that demand. And really, I think to go back to your questions, there's a few things we can attribute to that. The first one is that our tech is fascinated. I think all of us humans with a Z or humans with an S, and we're fascinated by tech. Like it's something about the era we're in. We're worried about tech, but we're also fascinated by it. When a new phone comes out, everybody's wow. Like when a new piece of AI comes out, everybody's wow. So there's that. Our tech is pretty incredible, and people don't kind of initially believe it, and when they start seeing it, they're amazed by it, and they just want to play with it. They just want to get their hands on it. And I think that's, again, a testament to the dev team and the founders and what they've done, but also just to an advantage we have. It's also not necessarily a sustainable advantage because somebody else might come out with something that's even more fascinating. So we're trying to stay at the forefront of it. And the second thing is we're really, really, really focused on the market needs. And not the business of it, but the market needs. And many times we ask ourselves, what should we do? And we don't do it necessarily based on the revenue opportunity, but rather on solving a problem in the market. And then we try to figure out how to make money from it, if it's relevant. So there's a lot of issues in the influencer marketing space right now. It's a new market. And like any new market, it's in the process of being defined. But like any new market that's under a gold rush, it's also a total mess. And I think you've heard me say this before, but a gold rush is, it's gold diggers that are rushing in, it's vultures, it's bandits, and it's like a lot of fools getting lost in the desert. And that's the current landscape of influencer marketing, and it's true on both sides. It's true on the influencer and aspiring influencer side, and it's true on the marketer side. And there's a lot of people taking advantage of the middle of it. And we're really focused on trying to build a sustainable industry for both sides. And trying to build demand on the influencer side, so it's not always the same people kind of getting a check, and we're really trying to build a broader economy where we think we can distribute money more between marketer budgets and people on the ground rather than always the same kind of big media companies or Google or Facebook or those guys. So we're like frenemies a little bit there. And on the other hand, on the market side, we're trying to make sure they can take advantage of this amazing opportunity that influencer marketing offers. If some companies get 20 or 30 times their money back from the ROI perspective, why can't everybody? Or why can't we at least get to like a much more predictable and forecastable results? So we're focused on that, not on our P&L, not on short-term cash gains. We're trying to build really the ultimate product, but also the ultimate economy. Like we're not just seeing our role as being a product, we're seeing our role as driving a better economy between marketers and influencers.
Yeah, I love that, Pierre. That's so fundamental, and I think that kind of learning can be used in any industry, but especially in something as I feel like I almost want to still call the industry new, because like you said, it's unstructured. There aren't any standards yet, and for you guys to be able to try and build those standards and build that foundation as part of your journey is quite incredible. But when you're building and launching a new SaaS company into the world, there are bound to be some pitfalls. Have you guys, what have you found to be some of the more difficult things you've needed to overcome, either in a local market, internationally, was part of the business itself and running it?
So there are a few things actually. SaaS companies are, there's a lot of SaaS companies and people love SaaS companies, so investors love SaaS companies because there's this idea of annuity revenue and you're going to sell it once and kind of keep making money from it. It's actually a pretty tough business to be in. You have to not only drive subscription but also usage. And so one of the decisions we made kind of really early, we didn't want to. We wanted to be a software company. We still want to fully be a software company, but we realized that we had to drive services on top of that software to make sure that people know how to use it and they don't have to commit early. When you ask a customer, take a 12-month subscription up front, otherwise you can't play, it's a big barrier. I have to learn how to do this influencer marketing thing and I have to commit, and what if it doesn't work? So we had to build a service layer. And I think a lot of companies, you mentioned other companies earlier, I'm not going to name them now, but a lot of them, they get stuck because it's a nice margin game when you start offering services and then you stop focusing on the software. And so about a year ago, at the start of COVID, well, less than a year ago, but at the start of COVID, we made a real strategic effort to refocus on the SaaS side of our business, saying, yes, the service side is going to be there because it's there to drive sales, but it's there to drive sales, not to drive revenue, not to make up for the SaaS side not picking up. Our strategy is SaaS software. We're a software company. We sell software to influencers. We sell software to advertisers, even if it's free in some cases. We still see it as the product. And the service is just to drive the SaaS sales. We didn't want to get stuck on the service side, but we're so close to getting stuck on the service side because service money is good. It's good money. And I think when you're in a startup, you must always keep track of your goal. People often talk about pivoting. A pivot must be a really careful decision, but what is your end goal and where are you going? Like, what is your vision? And not lose track of that because of cash pressure, because of revenue pressure, or anything like that. The second thing that we learned is that just because we're excited about something doesn't mean the market will be excited about it. Actually, Liav, who's now the CEO of the business in Israel, is the biggest advocate of that, which is to say, don't build something until someone's bought it from you. And I know that sounds extreme, but we always have great ideas, and then we're going to build it and test it and see. And you're a startup, you have very finite resources. And what I learned in Israel with that team, with my colleagues there, is this idea of saying minimum viable product, but really, 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 really minimum viable product, and sell it. And if somebody buys it, then you build it. If nobody buys it, if nobody's excited enough about it to buy it, then don't worry about it. Like, focus on something else. Yeah. And we still sometimes, we still get excited. Like, I talk about doing things for the sake of doing things. I'm a creative, building a board game, doing this, doing that. So every now and then we still kind of, do stuff for the sake of doing it. But really, from a strategy perspective, if you're going to build products, build SaaS, sell it before you build it. I know that sounds crazy, but if you listen to the story of how Alexa was sold and how Alexa was built, I don't know if you're familiar with it. I mean, for me, it's a fascinating story. Somebody in a room, sitting in a different room, basically answering to the voice prompts. It was a human in a room answering to the voice prompts. And when people heard it and saw what it did, they were amazed and they bought it. But they didn't build it yet. It was fake. It was somebody in a room. And I think that same principle applies to being a SaaS company and a product company. You need to know that you can build it. You need to be like, how long it's going to take you to build and get it done. But get that bite first. Don't invest resources and time and efforts in something that nobody really cares about. And I think most entrepreneurs and people that have ideas fall in that pitfall. They're like, oh, I have the best idea. My grandmother and this person told me they thought it was great, but who's bought it? You need traction. The most important thing in any business is traction. Follow traction, chase traction, get traction before you start moving.
I mean, that's I love hearing that. And I remember in some of the previous companies I used to work in, as the feet on the ground, you'd get so irritated by your boss selling things that hadn't been created or scoped out yet. But that is now, being a business owner, that is so much the way that things have to run. If you don't have buy-in, then why put in the effort? So really interesting take, Pierre. I appreciate that. But what does the future look like for you guys? Short-term, mid-term, long-term expansions. You've spoken about all these incredible new markets that you've been reaching out to, product roadmap enhancements, partnerships, anything like that you'd like to mention?
A lot on the go right now. As I mentioned, we just finished a capital raise, and so we're now budgeting and deploying that capital in different directions. One of them is international expansion. But we've already launched in a lot of countries in the last 6 months. We've done 3 new countries, and potentially a fourth one very soon as well in the last 6 months. And for from a base of 1 to 3 to 7, it's a really quick expansion in the space of 12 months, especially during the times of COVID. So so more international expansion is definitely on the roadmap for us. Our clients are pushing us to it. We're lucky to be backed by big multinational companies and that have taken a chance, even though we're not everywhere globally, but they say, well, we trust that you will be, right? So we're taking a chance, and so they're pushing us, and so it's on us to make sure that we are able to service them across all these different countries. That's one thing. From a product perspective, a lot of focus in meaningful directions, such as, for example, e-commerce. One of the key trends that we're seeing, I don't think many companies see it this way, but we believe that the role of influencer and marketer are converging. And what I mean by that is that many marketers are building big social accounts and are trying to expand their influence outside of their main job as a marketer and their ideas and their opinions, and building essentially media brands around their knowledge and their ideas. vice versa, influencers or people that have built big social media profiles are starting to sell products. I mean, if you just look at kind of big celebrities in South Africa, you'll see they're all building their own products, but in other countries, it goes a few levels down. And people who have 100,000, 200,000 followers sell online services or Patreon type subscriptions or whatever it is. And so the difference between a human and a business now, when it comes to the online space, is becoming much more blurry. And so we're focusing on building a lot of tools that will bring that further and faster to fruition. So allowing influencers and people that have built brands online to essentially commercialize those brands and monetize those brands, and vice versa, helping businesses to obviously build greater influence, which is what we're doing currently, I guess, in some ways.
Quickly, those markets that you are in and expanding to?
So currently, Israel, South Africa, Turkey, those were our first 3 markets. South Africa was our first market outside of Israel, and it's still a big market for us because we've got all of our marketing teams here. And our first investor, like I said, was from South Africa. We're in Nigeria as well. We're in Brazil. We are in the UK. And very, very soon we'll be in India as well, which is going to be a massive market for us. So we are like in the last few meters of launching in India. We are also looking at, we've tried going into Australia. There was actually a small failure for us, but we are, it's a very fragmented market and far. It's very far. So as much as it's similar to South Africa, it's also very different. So we'll probably be going back to Australia in 2021 again. And UAE is also another place that we are being asked to expand into. So those are the ones on the roadmap. But we've got a lot of other places. We're running pilots in the States. We ran a pilot in Indonesia. So I was just on a phone call yesterday about expanding to France and Italy. So again, there's a lot of demand. It's just about us, figuring out where we're going to deploy those resources and that time, and where the market wants us the most, I guess. Yeah. But I said, set it first before you build it.
So congratulations. I think that's phenomenal growth in such a short period of time. So proud to hear that seeing what you guys have built and the things that are coming up. So congrats, man.
Thank you. I think one more thing, if I can add, just to add to the question, is you asked, now I can tie 2 answers together. You asked earlier, what makes you successful, and now you asked about our international expansion. Many SaaS companies, when we look at the big SaaS companies in the influencer marketing space, are essentially selling software from like 1 or 2 regional hubs. And they go and say, well, we've got an office in London or Ireland and one in the States, and we live in Panama. It's fine. We'll sell you software from the States. And what we realize is that we are an international or global software company, but influencer marketing is a local game. It's completely a local game. There's the nuances in culture. And if you're trying to build an economy and be at the center of an economy, you can't do that from overseas. You've got to be in the markets to help build the economy. And so the reason we're expanding slowly, or slower than I guess other companies that on day one say they're a global company, can work anywhere, is because we put boots on the ground in every single country. And that might not be relevant to every business, but if you really want to penetrate a market properly and I guess have a feel for that market and be invested in the market, that's been our approach, and hopefully it will pay off for us. But I think it's part of the love for Humanz, is the fact that we have boots on the ground and partnerships on the ground with people across both sides, marketers and influencers, and taking their concerns, their thoughts, their ideas to help build the economy and the product there.
Amazing. So taking all that into account, your personal career, the experience that your partners bring to it, the technology itself, what would you, either from a personal perspective or from a company perspective, describe as being your unfair advantage?
It's a loaded question, unfair advantage, right? I think from a business perspective, our advantage, the real advantage we have is this team, as I mentioned. I think we could be doing pretty much anything that's software related, and this team would succeed. We'd be building, I don't know, taxis or the next delivery service or whatever it is. And I think because of the passion and because of the talent and the dynamics and the culture of that team, I think that's what makes it worthwhile. It took me 15 years of my career to find a place like this where I don't feel like I'm working. I'm lucky to have a wife that, pulls me back, and kids that pull me back and say, hey, you've been at this for 16 hours. Can you spend a little time with us? And I'm like, oh, sorry. And then I take a couple of days off. But I don't feel like I'm working. I'm passionate. It's like being in the middle of an adventure. It's like being in the middle. And I think that is an unfair advantage when you don't count the time, when you don't count the hours, when you don't feel like you're under pressure to succeed because you have to, but because you want to. I think that's one thing. And I think if I think a bit more philosophically about what you said, what's my unfair advantage personally? I think I was very fortunate. I mean, I was very fortunate. I have the privilege of having been in a family that was strongly middle class in France, and so and exposed to a lot of diversity. I have family all over the world. I had strong role models in my life, from my father to my grandfather, and I saw them succeed. I saw them fail in some instances. They gave me the opportunity to work, to study, and all these different things. And I guess I've had the privilege throughout my life of doing what I was passionate about. And I know that's not true for everybody, and I don't take that for granted. But having the privilege of the chance of doing what I was passionate about and focusing on what I was passionate about means that I was able to build all that knowledge and all these various experiences without feeling the pressure of what am I going to put on the table today, or how am I going to? I have to do this, otherwise I'm doomed. So I don't take that for granted. I think a lot of people in the world don't have that unfair advantage. I think most people in the world don't have that unfair advantage, so I definitely don't take that for granted, and I appreciate that from a personal perspective.
It's powerful stuff, Pierre. Thank you so much. It's been so cool chatting to you again, catching up, and I think there's so many golden nuggets out of this discussion. Normally I'd ask you for some golden nuggets, but I feel like there's 20, 30 of them that come out of this that people can take when they're building up their business or thinking about tech or thinking about life in general. So I really appreciate that. Are you good? You happy with that?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. It was an absolute pleasure, and it's a great show. So I look forward to watching the next few episodes too.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Pierre. Good seeing you.
Thanks, Calvin. Keep well.